Our today's eminent speaker, Mr. Deepankar Bhattacharyya. Deepankar ji is a strategic consultant who has been involved both with corporate sector and academia. He founded design consultancy firm Images Communications in 1984 and has been offering design services across several sectors to corporations, government organizations, and NGOs. He conducts workshops on design, innovation, and creative thinking. Deepankar ji is an alumnus of National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, and was part of the first UG batch that graduated from NID. Today, we are going to talk to him about his specialization, user-centered processes in design, with a view to discover opportunities and address them for enhancing overall quality within organizations, as well as their interaction with their users via various touch points. Thank you, sir, for joining us today on this Varta session. I'll now request Mr. Deepankar Bhattacharyya to present his thoughts and views on today's theme, Design for Social Equity. I request the audience to keep their mics on silent mode. The queries can be posted in the message box. We'll address them in the later part of the session. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anu. That was a very kind introduction. So before we get into this whole area of design for social equity, let's try and clarify a few points. One is, of course, the whole idea of what design means. Now, design down the years has meant several things, and modern design, because of its interpretations of where it originated in the Bauhaus and as a reaction to the quality of goods being produced in an industrial environment, and really started to look as the designer products. As a matter of fact, for several years, even communication design was looked at as somewhat different from the whole area of more tangible products. Over the years, however, this has changed, and we do look at design in much broader terms, in terms, especially when it came to the idea that design principles can also be used, in the design of non-tangible areas like services, for example, or when it comes to trying to extract some of the design principles that we have honed over the years, and the question arises whether we can actually use it, use these principles elsewhere. Now, designers come to the table, they bring to the table a certain mindset and a certain set of skills. The way we do our work, we are very intuitive. We try to be empathetic. We try to use our we are sort of tuned to use our sensory apparatus, our sense of the visual, our sense of the auditory, our sense of touch. The whole sensory apparatus is somewhat, we are more trained than, let's say, an engineer is, or a sociologist is, or others are. And inevitably, because of the origins of modern design, we have had something to do with the whole area of aesthetics. Now, aesthetics for a long time, became the driving factor because of the way design was perceived in the marketplace. Because one of the things, apart from technological edge and the edge that a corporation got, because of its manufacturing facilities, the quality that it could deliver, because of those manufacturing facilities, was the way the product looked. Apart from, of course, the way the product actually, the ergonomic considerations, etc., which were pretty standard at, which had become standardized at one point. Now, the way a product looked became quite important, and could give you a competitive edge to a certain degree in the marketplace. And there was a time when this became a signature for companies. For example, Brown had a signature as to how their products would be, and of course went far beyond how it looked. It Dieter Ram's 10 principles of what design should be in terms of its simplicity, in terms of what it did with people, how it interacted with people, how it looked, and all of that. I mean, these were the beginnings of looking at design as somewhat more than just the sensory thing, or going more than its relationships to its immediate origins, which is really the world of craft and the products that emanated from there. However, having said that, we must not forget the contribution of the Ulm school, and this was really in relationship to what happened in Hitler's Germany, because the founders of Ulm had lost immediate family to the concentration camps, and so their contribution really to the whole vocabulary of what design thinking was beginning to look like was really the point that you cannot look at design separate from politics of the day. You cannot look at, pardon? You cannot look at design separate from the socio-cultural realities of where it's happening. Now, we in India didn't learn this for a very, very long time. I come from the first bunch of, people from undergraduates from NID, and we did not really appreciate this difference at all. And most of the faculty we had were from either Europe or the United States, or people who had studied in the schools, in those countries. And these people were very enamored with what they saw over there, and really regurgitated what all of that. In terms of an aesthetic sense, a lot to speak. Now, it wasn't until several of us early birds from there hit the streets in the workplace that we saw the big mismatch. And so design needed to find itself, a new kind of meaning. And since then, it's been a journey of discovery, not only for us. I mean, the whole idea of what happened across the world, the move away from a Eurocentric view of the world to the whole idea of what postmodernism means, all of this contributed to a multiplicity of views of what design can be. But one factor that sort of runs through the entire thing is that design is essentially a process which is related to human beings, for one thing. I mean, it's it has to do with human beings, and it has to do with making things better for human beings. So in other words, making things better for us in the sense, if we really look at it in its earliest manifestations, we could go back to the time when our very primitive ancestors would have seen fire and made the connection that, oh my goodness, fire can help us. Can I harness it in some way? I can use it for security. I can use it for warming up myself. I can use it for perhaps for cooking. All these started to develop it. Now this is really a design act, because what you're doing here is making a creative leap, and solving a problem in a way which is intuitive, for one thing, and which is you're doing something that makes things better and is related to very much from a human point of view. So a lot of design must start from the human outwards. When you design products, you start from the dimensions of man, so to speak. When you design, architects know this very well. When they design buildings, you must design the human being onwards. Suppose we were not like this. Suppose all of us were 20 feet tall. Suppose we had 4 arms and 10 legs. surely our habitats wouldn't look like this. So it is obvious that design, or any meaning of design, must revert back to the human, whether it's in the physical dimensions or increasingly today in the cognitive dimensions of what it means to be human. Now, having said this, I would like to clarify two other areas that we are going to talk about. One is social and the other one is equity. When we talk of equity, we are talking about a certain fairness, a fairness about things. So many architects and town planners have been concerned with fair, and I must say communication designers have been concerned with fairness, and I've worked in the area of equity for a very long time. I mean, you only have to see some of the posters that came out from, the protest posters, starting from what happened in, the Eastern Europe, and I mean, they had a culture of this thing going. So they have been a very much part of protest movements and movements of, and they have been actually making products, which are related to equity. Architects have been concerned with equity for a very long time. Town planners have been trying to make things equitable as well. But can we now think of moving beyond what designers have been doing with products into some other areas? Can we contribute in other ways? Now, these are questions that come to us simply because of 2 or 3 huge things that have happened, and many in certainly in my lifetime, and quite possibly in the lifetime of several of you over there, and that really is the shift into an age that is driven by information and communication, led by internet and all its manifestation. For example, one of the earliest manifestations that was felt by the corporate world was that you can actually get rid of your factories. You can get rid of your factories and outsource all your production to the common marketplaces of the world, which were really growing up in places like China, Taiwan, and other places. Now, making such a step gave you a lot of advantages, but it also did a lot to change the way you did business, because the moment you do that, and everybody starts to get their products manufactured from these common factories which have a uniform level of sophistication in terms of finished goods, then you have lost the edge in the marketplace, as the edge that you used to get from your proprietary production methods or the machines that you had at your disposal. So, and this disadvantage that you picked up there was really at the advantages you got in terms of the capital outlay that you were now required to when you start to develop or to get online a new product offering. These could be now done at a much cheaper price. Your capital outlay is much lower because you didn't actually have to spend on a lot of other things which you would otherwise have to do in your own factories. Now, this was fundamental. The other thing that went hand in hand with this development was how everyone, every single user had access to the internet, and they could, with their social media channels and other means, could give you feedback in real time. In the old days, in my youth, we designed and made products, and we would get our advertisers to persuade others to buy them. And those others were called consumers, and they would inevitably have to buy what we produced, because they couldn't give us their feedback in real time. They gave us feedback really slowly, and we didn't really have to listen all that much. So this gave everybody the impression that designers and manufacturers were the ones who knew what is best, and they were the kind of custodians of good taste, so to speak, and nobody else really mattered. Now, with the advent of this new order of things, with communication and information and communication changing everything into a two-way street, into an interactive two-way street, you no longer had a consumer anymore. You know, at best, they could be called a user at that point of time. And corporations were very quick to take notice of this. They knew that all those corporations that were till then, you know, really driven by things like technology, operations, finance, had a new kid who was going to make a mark on them, and that was really the user. And in their setup, who were the people who knew the users best? It was some obscure designer sitting in their R&D department. You know, somebody woke up and said, "Oh, this guy has been dealing with users all his life. So let's call him in and ask him what what is this entity who we understand nothing about." Because truth be told, the finance guys, the ops guys, the engineer knew nothing about the user. In fact, the designers also didn't know too much about the user because we were not very democratic in our thinking. We never thought the user as someone on equal terms with us. We always thought we were better than them in terms of our sensibilities, in terms of what we knew, and that complex was there, and this was really what gave rise to all those big names in design of the last century. Now, this understanding that the user can influence events to this extent, forced us, and I've lived through all of this because I used to run an office, and we at one point were dealing with a lot of clients, all across, because I was collaborating with, firms who were and we were doing business with, people from across the world. And we saw how we actually had to bring in the user into, our offices and had to get them involved, right from when the project started. And this whole process gave rise to the whole idea of user centricity and co-creation. Because the moment...
So can we have the presentation on in between? So I think, yeah.
I'll just give 2 minutes. I'll just let you know.
Okay.
Yeah, the user centricity and co-creation. Now, I'm going to deal with this in a little bit of detail, because this really lays the groundwork for the principles that designed for social equity tends to rely on, and which was not available to us the entire, or at least the entire 20th century, or at least till pretty much the mid 1990s. So we certainly can have the slide now, and we can take it from
yeah, sure, sir. Swati, can I request you to put the slides on, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, we have seen that these user-centered processes, at one point becomes an inevitable consequence of advances in information and communication technologies, the internet, social media, and the possibility of immediate feedback from users. I have very quickly outlined, how this came to be, a respected part, of corporations, and was the prime driver behind them wanting to, coin something called design thinking, which really is trying to understand some of these processes, and making part of the vocabulary that others, most notably managers, use, because they all of a sudden felt it is not enough to understand operations. It's not enough to just understand finance. It is not enough to all the things that they did, but it was absolutely essential to try and understand what this user thing is. This and the end user is going to be such a have such a profound impact on what we do, and they can make the difference between, whether we survive or not. It is time we started to understand them. And this gave rise to, the whole subject of design thinking in schools of management. Most notably in Stanford University, where it's really something that anyone who's enrolled in the university can enroll for. Now, next slide, please. Now, the corporations very quickly saw that, especially since they had, they no longer really had the competitive edge that they had earlier derived from tech. Although R&D was still very much, a huge factor in what was happening. But mind you, this another huge big thing was that the internet and this information communication revolution gave us was the whole business of digitization. Now, when you have digitization, you are shifting a major part of product functions from the sensory, from the visual, from the physical aspect to what? To the cognitive, to a space which is behavioral. So if you open up any of your products today, in my youth, if I had to make a camera, I would make a separate, physical camera. I would make a sound system. I would make a telephone. I'd make what you. But today you have one black box, and through a series of user interfaces, you are actually interacting with it, with this thing in very, very different ways. So you are actually what has happened over here is the whole function has shifted into a behavioral space. So when this happens, designers need to concentrate a great deal more on behavior, on understanding user behavior. And understanding user behavior began to become certainly more important than the look of the product. This shift from the visual, because I mean, one black box is almost the same as any other black box. Now, in my youth, we spent 4 weeks, doing, this curves, understanding these complex curves of these products, and radii manipulation, we used to call it. And I mean, how much of that are you going to do in the little black boxes that all of us carry around? So this shift into the digital products gave rise to a whole different kind of product offering. Now, with all these things going on, the shift, when this sort of shift happens, the user is telling you a lot more than what he or she wants in terms of how a product looks or how a product is in terms of ergonomic functions. You have gone into the realm of really the cognitive, and this is where you're really interacting with the user's minds. And most user-centered processes that we talk about, and talking about user-centered processes, we are really talking about our relationship, or the designer's relationship, or the corporation's relationship, or the service provider's relationship, or who is doing the providing at one end, relationship with the user's mind. User's mind in terms of, those interactive spaces, where the user chooses to interact with you or your offering. Now, and this must allow us to, gives us scope to start understanding what the meaning of these user-centered, processes, delve a little more into what these user-centered processes, can mean, and, how co-creation and user-centered processes, become the cornerstone of, product development in today's time. Corporations have made the transition, quite seamlessly. And if you look at the top corporations of today, they look very different from the ones that were there, 10 years earlier, and certainly so, which were there 20 years earlier, and especially in the areas where which are consumer facing, in terms of whether it is the way you do your shopping, which is area of retail, the way you do your how you order your food, the way you most things have the way you even hospitality. I mean, people like Airbnb and Zomato and Ola, they have changed the way all of us use any of the services provided by by the service providers. And to understand how this works, we need to be concerned with the user-centered and user-centered processes, which is becoming a completely new field of study, that designers are increasingly beginning to try and come to grips with. And user-centered processes are for instance, behavioral scientists, ethnographers, sociologists, psychologists have a great deal of information, which when we work with them, we are able to, make a lot of sense of what these user-centered, processes can be. Next slide, please. Now, when we now having said that, the distinction between what our corporations do and the larger community that we are in, there are no real barriers, and at one point, the user will demand a certain level of quality, shall we say, from what is happening around them, from the community spaces, from the community services, all of that. Now, of course, there have been people who have been designing, products around this. And as I mentioned earlier, town planners and architects and communication designers, have been involved with, in all of this, for a very long time, But, when we talk of, in spite of having saying that, I mean, when it comes to equity, we've had, quite a history of, unequal, services and spaces. When we look at this, our surroundings, and when we look at the services offered to us, around us, one of the first questions we must ask ourselves: who are they designed for? In many of the places that we go to, notably in some of the smaller towns, and you go into the marketplaces, and you'll find that they are designed for actually nobody. Money is being spent, engineers are doing their job, the municipal corporators are meeting their deadlines, but the person on the street, does not feel that the road has become less crowded. The pedestrian doesn't feel safer. The two-wheeler driver doesn't feel safer. The shopkeepers over there don't feel that they're getting anything out of it. Nobody really feels happy. So obviously somebody who's critical to the whole thing, and that is you and I, the user, has been kept out of the scheme of things by and large. Apart from that, because we have never been consulted, on any of these projects that have come up in our public spaces, there is a lot of discrimination, especially against those who have, not been able to raise a voice so far. And some of them who come to mind, I mean, the differently abled, for example, women, for example, the poor, for example. Now, I mean, not much of a voice they have, and you'll find that there are differences between what the city can do for them and what the city can do for someone, who are not from a disadvantaged demography. like that. I mean, some of us really own the city a little more than others, whether it comes to, the spaces that we have in there, whether it comes to the services that are provided over there, whether it comes to the security, that is felt by us. There are, it is certainly not an equitable, mix. Next, please. Now, the question that we must ask when we talk of design for social equity is, can the motivations, needs, and desires of a variety of people be incorporated in the design of services for the larger community? In the road networks, access to health, access to education, access to water and utilities. Can we have a development of a culture of design where the needs of a variety of users come first? Can our surroundings speak of a culture of design? Can we feel that there is a culture of design out there? You step out into the streets and you feel that there's a culture of design out there. And here, when I talk of design, I mean it in the widest possible sense, as something that, an activity out there that is there to make things better for us, make things better for all of us. So this is a question that all of us needs to ask at one point, because as designers, if we just stay with the making of products and now a little bit more into the services, we are, I'm afraid, restricting ourselves to a fraction of what we can do. We must ask ourselves whether we can do more, and I think we can. Let me elaborate a little bit on this. Can we take the next slide, please? To do this, one of the things that one of the starting points is understanding that you and I, humans, we are not standalone agents anywhere. We are part of systems. We are part of several kinds of systems. There are systems and subsystems and sub-subsystems, all kinds of systems. We have systems of governance, systems of law, we have cultural networks, we have social networks, we have political networks, we have physical networks, we have networks which have to do with utilities, we have networks which have to do with shopping and marketing, we have networks which have something to do with production of goods and services. All these are networks and all these are parts of systems, and these systems dovetail together to give us this whole human-made world that we have created. This is very, very complex, and all of us have some sort of a relationship with these systems as a whole and the parts that we interact with at any given time. For example, if you have a legal case going on, you become very much involved with that legal part of the system. The whole legal system becomes, paramount in your mind. And the question you ask yourself is, how friendly is this to me? Similarly with the education system, I, as a student who got into the education system, will at one point ask, does this understand me? Or does it understand some babu sitting in the Ministry of Education? Or does it understand some teacher who got his or her education 40 years ago? Does it understand me? Now, these are questions that the end user, asks at any of these given points. When you are, in a road network, that road network or a bridge or any of these things have been built by engineers with their, and they are masterpieces from the engineering point of view. But at the end of the day, the user over there will ask, how does it work for me? So understanding these systems and being able to break them down into their components, looking at the relationships between, all these systems, understanding what tasks and processes, are, play out in those systems. And at the end of the day, looking at the user journeys, being able to map the user journeys through these various systems and subsystems to be able to map out a series of experiences that we can actually, evaluate for their quality, will give us a certain idea, of the level of quality of experience that we can derive from each of those things. Some of you have done systems thinking and systems design, with me, and you have gone through the basics of what I am talking about. I'm hoping that you will have some questions regarding of what we discuss over here, and which you relate back to what you have learned in those courses, and bring them into the area of design for social equity. Because social equity, when we talk of social equity, we cannot divorce it from an understanding of systems and the relationship between the human being out there and the systems which operate around that person, and which really become their world. We are so divorced from the natural world. Few of us live amongst trees and nature and thunderstorms and all of that. We are living in insulated cities. We are living in human-built worlds. And human-built worlds, remember, we have made them. These systems have been made by us. We admit that we did not give it much thought, or perhaps we did not have the tools to give it much thought. But today, with the communication and information technologies at our disposal, we do have the tools. Some of us who are working with systems and who are working with systems thinking, have been exploring these tools for several years now. Some of you, some of the students here, have also been, opened up to what these tools can do for you, and you have understood. Many of you have understood the idea of experience. Many of you have understood the idea of what experience can do to human beings. And how designing of experiences can influence outcomes. Whether it be in education, whether it be in how we access health, whether it be in how we access any of the transportation, the quality of experience that is designed into the whole thing, influences, what happens to us. And these are things that you and I will have to be doing. And it's not, it is more than products. We know what to do. The tools do not change. We just got to think a little wider. We need to distill the same thing. I mean, there are some things we do very well. We are iterative. We keep making prototypes. We make hazard prototypes. You make these sketches all the time. Every time you make a sketch, what are you doing? Those are two-dimensional prototypes. One slightly better than the other. Now, engineers don't work like this. We don't know what's going to happen next. We explore. Engineers don't work like this. Engineers have got to know what point A and point B is, and they are going to find a way to get from point A to point B. And they're going to devise, step 1, step 2, step 3 to do that. You and I don't do that. You and I start off from somewhere after having done our homework as far as understanding what the problem space is concerned, as far as understanding who the stakeholders all are, as far as many of you who've done design process, in the way, especially in the user-centered way that I have been teaching for several years now, would know that understanding of the humans involved in the thing is critical. Because we know that no two people think alike. You think you know something about something, your mate doesn't agree with you. Your driver will not agree with you. Your next door shopkeeper will not agree with you. The taxi driver will not agree with you. In your own institution, your peon will not agree with you. Your peon and your director have completely divergent views on several points. It is true. Now, understanding this gives us critical information. Now, starting from this, we try and take the next step. And we try to evolve slowly through an iterative process, wherein each time we do something, it is a little better than the other, until at one point we've got something, my goodness, this has a possibility. Now this is something that very, very few, other professions do. It's like I keep telling my students, it's like a doctor cutting you up, from where your kidneys are, and halfway through saying, oh my goodness, this is not looking too good. I better go a few, I need to go 6 inches above and, cut this person up somewhere near the heart. Now, they won't do that, would they? But we do it all the time. We ditch, a line of thought halfway and you get into something else. Now, this process, this iterative process, this intuitive process, of getting somewhere, it's very creative. It's a very now, this is something we bring to the table. And it offers us insights that no other profession has. Because for one thing, the way we do it, it offers us a certain degree of empathy. Because we are forced to understand what the, so many different people, stakeholders in the game want. We are forced to develop a certain empathy. We need to understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're doing, what they're talking about, what they want. Today, any offering, whether it be a service offering or product offering, can be broken at the last mile. If the consumer writes, if a group of consumer goes to social media and tears it up, you are sunk. Yeah, and corporations have realized this long ago, but civic authorities haven't as yet. They will soon enough, because come election time, everybody sort of remember, what did we do for you? What do you remember? So this is par for the course. In many countries, it has already become. People are very careful here, and we are getting there. That is why you'll find there is a huge amount of improvement. I mean, everybody's learning. Everybody's learning. And the other big thing that it does for us is gives us something called a bottom-up approach to problem solving. Now, a bottom-up approach has quite a few advantages. I'm not saying it's the only way to do things, but it has certain advantages. For example, speedier implementation is certainly one, because if everybody agrees, or if it ties into everybody's motivations, then why wouldn't everyone adopt it? If you disregard my motivation and try to sort of stuff it down my throat, I'm going to resist it. But if you don't do that, if you work with my motivation, then why wouldn't I adopt it? So this is one. This is what. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things that designers are equipped to bring to the table. Next slide, please. So when we look at some of these things, we must ask, when we look at the services and we must look at the environment around us, we must ask, does everyone have the capacity to influence their own thought and behavior? Do we really do that? How many of us feel actually quite helpless, in terms of what we can or cannot do regarding our own environment, regarding our own lives? Does everyone have access to the services provided? Think about it. Do you really have access to all the services provided? You can have the technologically most advanced hospital sitting there in your town. Can you access it? To make that thing run, it'll become so expensive that 1% of us can access it. We are seeing this happening all the time. So these are real problems. So technology as an answer to everything is only half the story. There is more. There is a lot more. Can we do something about it? Is everyone able to act on what they consider their best interests? Are we really able to do that? Next slide, please. This is a time when I would like to bring up this whole thing, which is so close to what happened to us in the very recent past. This COVID-19 thing hit us like a ton of bricks, and the government was very, very quick to act, and they did a lot of good things. They really were concerned. They knew they had to do something quickly. They went at it on a war footing and tried to do many things, all very well intentioned. In spite of which, why did so many people choose to walk hundreds of kilometers back to their villages in spite of so many measures being taken to help them stay in cities during the recent COVID lockdown? Is this a relevant question to ask? Would it have helped to understand the points of view of the masons, the carpenters, the daily wages, their mind space, their motivations and their fears while implementing the otherwise efficient measures in the face of this pandemic? The daily wager has just lost his job. He sees this insurmountable problem in front of him, this raging epidemic. People are falling sick around him. He does not live in the healthiest of conditions. He's seeing his construction sites in other places closed down. He does not see any hope for him economically in the very near future. 3 months, and the government says we don't know, 3 months, 6 months, 9. Nobody knew. Nobody, and we were all thinking that vaccine will come a year later, which it did. I got my vaccine shots, a couple of days ago. Around a year later, we were right on track in our estimates. And given this, his expenses in the city is still mounting. He's got to feed his kids. He's got to keep the family going. What do you think that guy is going to do? Should we have asked him? What would have happened had we asked this person? Would that person have told us something which would have enabled us to take some measures which would have alleviated those? Because what happened at the end of the day? People walked. You couldn't stop them from walking. Police barricades couldn't stop them. Nobody could stop them. Masses and masses of people walked. At one point, many governments provided them with buses and there were trains which were run. Question is very simple. Why? These could have been also done earlier. It was in fact safer to do it at the beginning of the pandemic. It was correct to do it at the beginning. Why did we miss it? We missed it simply because our otherwise very efficient, implementation systems lacked something called human-centric data, which designers are very, very clued up on, but few other professionals are, because nobody really ever thinks from the other people's point of view. Designers do it because they have to. Because many designers don't. In my youth, I didn't, because I thought I knew everything, and I thought that Janta is going to swallow whatever I provided with them. So there was a culture of a different kind of a designer then. But in today's world, that is simply not true. You better keep your ears to the ground and listen, because that user is going to tell you exactly what she or he wants, and you're going to have to deliver. If you don't, somebody else is going to deliver. And this thing probably has taught us, hopefully it has taught everybody, including governments, is that you need to at one point start, listening. I hope it has. Would user-centered processes have allowed for insights that could have helped avoid this human tragedy? It's a question we must ask ourselves. Next slide, please. Why do people make the choices they make? Is it important to understand? Better and more innovative solutions depend on our ability to listen and incorporate different voices in the prototyping of services and experiences. Designers have kind of figured this out, especially in their offerings in the corporate world, because we are doing this all the time for corporations. Because corporations figured it out a little earlier. Now the point is to do this in a larger framework, and to do that we need to start thinking beyond products. At the end of the day, when we are making a product, we've already made one huge transition in the last few years, and that is from the physical product to a digital product, where emphasis has shifted a little more from the delivery of the function via the physical form of the product, to the delivery of function via the cognitive aspects of the product. So the shifting from the sensory to the behavioral. This has already taken place, and those of us who have been working in the corporate sector have learned this, are very much into it, and have been practicing this for several years now. People of my generation are not as proficient at this as the younger ones are, although some of the ground rules we were able to adapt, and we are like a bridge, because we were very clued up with the principles of design, and the youngsters with their new tools, with their new this thing, and the new were able to work. We were able to work together to translate some of those, design ideas into the whole behavior aspects of, offerings of services, whether it be in services or product. Now, this has been at least my role to a great extent over several years now. Now, a lot of that is really, when we talk of prototyping of services and experiences, and our, depending on our ability to listen and incorporating different voices, this has been learned the hard way in the marketplace. And many companies have learned it, didn't learn it and sank. Many companies realized it when they, began to lose ground. And, frankly, it's not been an easy time for many old school, corporations. If you look at the top few companies around the world, and especially in India, you will find there's a huge churn happening all the time. And the next 5 years it'll be even more accelerated. So we're in a time of huge change, and it is inevitable that we look to translate some of these things that we have learned. If we look to translate some of the changes that has happened in the world of design, in the world of as applicable to the world of business, to the larger community, because it's just, there are no appreciable boundaries anymore. For example, when today we can increasingly talk of the whole economy, which in terms of how it and again, because of the communication and information revolution, how every one of us has a much has a say in the economy, which we couldn't have had 15 years ago. There are people who would be sitting in a remote fishing village in in Kerala, who will be able to access prices in the fish market in Mumbai or somewhere else, and be able to gauge what sort of fish he needs to bring in for the next, what should be on his agenda. Now, what is happening over here? Every one of us is tapping into some aspect of this information and communication, revolution, and doing something to better our, own lives. It is happening at these levels. It is happening at the economic level. It is happening at the, at the level of production. It's happening at the level of business. It's happening at the level of trading. At every level, not just big corporate levels. It's happening at the, at the small shopkeeper level. And it is inevitable that we start to demand, and it's also beginning to happen. I'm not saying it's not happening. It is happening. The government has made major strides in bringing these technologies into the world of distribution, into the world of finance, into the world of access to health, and all of that. But all of these things, to my mind, if you are to avert the kind of tragedy that overtook us during the COVID pandemic, requires that other input, that the designers are so familiar with. This input of understanding, the user in a different kind of way, the ability to empathize with the user, How can we do that? Next slide, please. So is it time for designers to take our empathetic and intuitive processes and work with other professionals? Can we start with working with others? Because everybody's got something to bring to the table. There are those who bring a great deal of analytical thinking to the table, which is absolutely essential to roll out anything. There are those who can bring critical thinking, a high degree of critical thinking to the table. We bring in our own, call it design thinking if you like, although I don't like the term. Call it design thinking if you like. Whatever. We bring our own way to the table. But it's time we took this and started to work with other professionals to develop approaches to innovative problem solving that listens to what motivates others, listens to the needs of others, listens to the marginalized. Really listen. This is what I think. This is where I think design or designers can start, if they want to make some sort of an impact in their larger community. And if at one point we want to have a culture of design, an equitable culture of design around us, in our surroundings. I mean, we got to be fed up with the kind of stuff we've got around us. It works for nobody. None of us are happy with our roads. None of us are happy with our security. None of us are happy with any of the systems out there. And as designers, it's our job to fix it. I mean, at the end of the day, we've made this world, and designers have played a big part in making this world. With all these, fancy-looking products that we've been churning out. All these ridiculous box-type buildings that we've been making. All these badly planned, cities that we've been churning out because of some whims of some, some guy who got a bright idea sitting in some office who's never spoken to, a mason or carpenter, daily wage earner. We flooded our environment with crap, with offerings that emanated from the recesses of our minds. And it's time to put a stop to that. It's time to open our minds. We can close this and take questions now. I hope I'm able to start some lively discussions over this.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really thoughtful and insightful. And I think the responsibilities of designers have also grown much more now in today's time. They can't just think of aesthetics. They need to be more curious, go out in the field and understand what the common man, common user wants. So, and also think about the environment. Thank you so much for, sharing so much of information and your thoughts and telling us all about user-centered processes that can be used in design. And now I open this session for discussion. You may, if you want to write in the chat box, you can do that. Otherwise, yeah, you can, unmute your mic and you can ask questions. And if you want to discuss something with Deepankar, sir, we'll be happy to take that. Bhargav sir, hello, how are you? Can we have something from your side?
Actually, I just looked at the time and it's a lot more than I thought it would.
But I think it's a much needed thing. Yeah, hello Bhargav sir, welcome.
Sorry, I was pressing the wrong button.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know that's some digital challenges we all have to face. Yeah.
There we are. Very Deepankar, really nice to see you here. I mean, I could really follow what you're saying, and I could appreciate. I could be one with it. It would be nice, if you have any examples where you have got designs which are technology centric and user centric, and see the difference between the two, and then show to people. Like it'll be really great to understand in case you have anything.
So you'll have to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, let's. That's a good area. Now, I think all of the stuff that you and I grew up with, in terms of products, that you saw around you, in terms of when you talk of the sound systems around you, in terms of, most of the products, they were really built on, the technological or the edge, or the edge that the manufacturers had in their factories, in terms of, product quality of the product offering. So if and that was really what drove them. I mean, that is why you chose a Brown product or a Philips product over some locally made product. Especially Indian products, we simply could not produce the kind of quality at that time that we had.
Right.
So those would be the edge would really be derived from the technology and the processes that you had at your disposal. But when we talk of human-centric edge, then we are in a totally different thing. For example, if you look at the whole idea of booking booking some transport, and you think of Ola and Uber, how do you do it? This is human-centric design, because it all depends on that UI that you've got out there.
Yeah.
And this UI, has been getting better over the years. If you remember the early days of places like Amazon, the marketplace, it wasn't so user-friendly. If you look at Google itself, it wasn't so user-friendly. If you look at Facebook, it wasn't so user-friendly. But over the last 10 years, we made rapid strides. Now, and what has happened? We say this has been developments in design, but essentially the developments in design have been in the way human behavior has been understood, and translated into these newer, offerings. So today, for example, one of the largest, in terms of value, in the hospitality industry is Airbnb, and they don't own a single property. This was really, Airbnb is really the brainchild of two Rhode Island School of Design graduates, who figured out that you don't need, who, because of their own accommodation problems, decided to crack the space of how do you get accommodation, in a city. And if you wanted to get into the hospitality business, if you didn't want to spend lakhs and lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of rupees on just setting up a hotel, what do? You become an Airbnb.
Yeah, that's true.
Now this is revolutionizing the marketplace. In this, now retail, for example. What is retail doing? This pandemic especially has taught us, the value of places like Amazon. And these places that give you groceries in your home. And they've taught you the value of all of this vis-a-vis, actually having to go to a physical shop and doing all your shopping. Now, this is how could these products be developed? The design of these products is dependent on the design team out there, understanding the different kinds of humans who are going to access this. Why do humans are going to access these? The Amazon marketplace on the net are different kinds. There are 80-year-olds, there are 5-year-olds, there are women, there are men, there are people who understand different languages, there are people who have different habits, there are people who barely will understand, cultural differences, there are lots of differences. And
Yes.
market got to be able to.
But the more I see these, the more I see these so-called revolutionary designs, the more I feel that they are not designed by designers. Like, none of these great revolutionary designs are designed. The designers have just borrowed these things and put it in their vocabulary.
Borrowed from whom?
No, I mean, I'm talking about things like borrowed. Okay, now borrowed from whom? Now, that's also very. I feel that it's co-creation, collaboration. It's collaboration with so many different domains that a single cannot do it.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying.
Engineers, the businessmen, the
Absolutely.
users, scientists, everything.
This is exactly what is happening to design.
Yeah.
Designers have got to get off their high horse and learn to work in teams. The problems are too big. The problems are too complex. You know, for designers to say, I can handle it on my own, that I know best. This is, as I mentioned before, this is a huge, shift. This
Yeah, thank
co-creation is a huge shift.
absolutely. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Bhargav, sir, for.
It is humbling. We must become humble.
I think it was an interesting session, So great. Is there anyone else who would like to ask any question? Thank you so much, Bhargav, sir.
Welcome.
Hi, Deepankar.
Yeah, Binil. Yeah.
Hi, Deepankar.
Hi, Binil. How are you?
As usual, a brilliant session, thought-provoking. My question is, how do design schools address these challenges in their curriculum? How do we create designers who believe in social equity? Who has an understanding of inequalities, gender, all these, and typically in our curriculum we don't have modules like gender studies or inequality studies or sociology. So as a contemporary design school, what would be the skills from a curriculum point of view the design school should be exposing students to?
Well, there are several aspects to this. One is, several of us, when we teach design process, we've made radical departures from the way we were taught design process, and we have incorporated, especially in the area of understanding the problem space. We spend much more time these days on understanding the stakeholders. If I am interested in a problem space and I find that the stakeholders in that problem space, I would like to understand the different cultural and social background they come from, the different economic background they come from, the different age groups they belong to, the different, the different thinking processes that they have. And I like to have my students go out and talk to hundreds and hundreds of, 200 is the number I give them in that space of 10 days, and they get horrified at first, but when they see their own results, they are, they're very, very happy. I make them go and I ask them to do it day and night, because something that is happening at 3 in the night is not happening at 3 in the afternoon. So I've had teams, camp out there, at all times of the day and night, looking at situations, talking to different people. Now, what this does is gives us empathy. Teaches us to look at things from the other people's points of view, people who we would not have considered otherwise. So this is a start that some of us have certainly made. The other thing that, and the fact that I do get called to design schools means they are appreciating, some of the effort. And increasingly, whenever I get an opportunity to do this, I also try to wrangle the course in systems thinking and design. Because
we really appreciate, sir. Thank you so much. I know you had come over here and our students, went out and they interviewed many people. It was quite an interesting, thing that they learned during that exercise, because we could see that difference when they go on to the next semester or the next year, and that whole outlook changes and the kind of, inputs they start bringing in their work. So thank you so much and we would always want you to be associated with us and, and teach our students. Yeah, so I think we also
this along with an understanding of how systems work, forces us to look at things from other people's point of view. Of course, this is only a start. And as you mentioned, Binil, I think we must include things like gender studies. We must include, we must try to understand really that it is an unequal world. There's a whole area of, design being developed called inclusive design. Now, inclusive design is not just, inclusiveness in terms of the differently able, but inclusive in many, many, many ways, It is inclusive at the level of the physical, it is at the level of the cognitive, it's inclusive at the level of the ergonomic, it's inclusive in level of culture, level of sociology. You know, today the way design was practiced, especially with my generation and the few generations around that time, was not even inclusive in terms of the different kinds of Indians that we have. Look at the way you guys sit. All of you sit on these chairs. Why do you do that? You know where these chairs came from? It comes from a European tradition because they couldn't keep their backsides on the cold floor. There were two ways this problem was solved. Either use chairs like this or use rugs. Indians didn't have to do that. Indians did it because, you know, the early designers were taught, they were mesmerized with furniture like this. So instead of designing a seating solution for our fellow human beings, we redesigned the human being to fit these chairs that these manufacturers produce, especially in those, in my time it was Godrej. To keep his business going, we redesigned a whole generation of human beings. Our classrooms, our railway stations, our airport lounges, do they really have to have chairs like this? Can't you sit cross-legged on them? Can't you make other kinds of seating arrangements? Or even if you go to a restaurant, you know, any kind of a restaurant, act like you dropped your napkin and peep underneath what people are doing. Most of those people out there, even in a five-star joint, have got their legs up on their chair sitting cross-legged. It's what
Very
we do.
true, very true.
It's
Yeah.
what we do best.
Yeah.
You know, so our designers have been very, very, very lax. You know, they keep talking about, you know, design for people, design for human beings, design for human needs, but that's all bullshit. It's just words that they learned in the European schools and never understood what it meant for India. And it's time. I mean, it's a long time. I've been in this business for 50 years. You know, it's time we got out of this. You know, especially your generation, you know, needs to revolt and ask some fundamental questions as to what we are doing.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we can keep listening to it throughout and, you know, understand how to move forward. But we'll invite you again and listen to more of your thoughts so that we can keep initiating changes in our curriculum and our systems and, you know, take design step further and understand humans more and more. So thank you so much for the session, sir.
Thank
And
you.
we
It's
look
been a
forward.
pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And thank you to the wonderful audience, you know, who showed interest and have been around and asking questions. So thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye, sir.